So today we have a interesting and inspiring speaker. Before he takes over, let me narrate his experience or his story. Born in Mumbai to an entrepreneurial parents, second amongst the sibling, he did his entire education in Mumbai. After which he started with Deloitte, working there, and then he got an opportunity and sailed to the Gulf shores to reach Qatar. He worked with Deloitte there. After some time, he moved to Kuwait, and then after that to Dubai. And all these places, he worked with the construction, shipping, and manufacturing company. So that was nearly 2 decades of experience in the Gulf shore. After which he came back to India with a spell in a Scottish company called Weir. But his calling was always to inspire young minds. And he got this opportunity to come and share his expertise and inspire at Christ University in 2016. Of course, our institution also is blessed to have someone like him. He's a trained Mindspace professional. He has 2 kids and lives in Bangalore with his lovely family. On behalf of the leadership chair and all present here, let me welcome Prof Mathew Varghese. Prof Mathew Varghese, thank you so much for joining. Without much delay, over to you.
Do you remember the time when you took that very crucial examination that you thought could either make you or break you? Well, I was getting ready to take India's most overrated exams, the 10th standard board exams. Respected Vice Chancellor, Pro VC, Registrar, COE, heads of departments, directors, deans, coordinators, colleagues, and friends. It was my dream to be an engineer. So after finishing my 10th standard exams, I applied to the best colleges in Bombay, Ruia, Ruparel, SIES. Results day. I went to my school to collect the results. 95%. All I needed was 80%. Took a closer look. Goodness gracious, I had read that in the reverse. It was 59%. Now on one side of our school was a ground, and beside that was a cemetery. Now my friends and I have spent many hours in the cemetery during our recess. I wanted to go there and hide. And I thought if the earth swallowed me, even better. Now you may wonder why. Well, because my mom was a teacher. And I will share an inside secret, a teacher's inside secret. Well, I know it's not a secret here, but let me share it anyway. You know, teachers compete with each other on the basis of their children's marks. Now, I'm talking of school teachers, not university teachers. I wouldn't want to make that mistake here. So as I moved that day from school to home, I didn't know what to expect. As I reached home, my mom collected the mark sheet. She took one look at it and she fell plop on the sofa. Then my dad came. He took a look at my mark sheet and he said, "You don't take science, you take commerce." Out went engineering, in came accounting. I finished my BCom. One of my uncles said, "Try MBA." So I applied in a few colleges. In my first college, I went for the group discussion. And the moderator gave me a topic, like all of us, we were there. I didn't even understand the topic. But the others went for, against, for, against. I felt more like a spectator in a tennis match. At the end of the group discussion, the moderator told me, "Number 7, you haven't spoken. Why don't you give the concluding remarks?" So I concluded it. After which he said, "Oh, that was pretty apt for a conclusion. It sounded more like a vote of thanks." Now in my next group discussion, I'm so determined to do well. So come at the day, come at the hour. I didn't even show up. I quit. Out went MBA. In came nothing. It was around that time I happened to see a childhood friend of mine. "Hey, Amit, what's up?" And he said, "Well, I'm doing chartered accountancy." My question to him, "Hey, do they have group discussion?" "No." And then he went on to explain, it's a 3-year program. You got to do articleship and you simultaneously write your exams. So I enrolled. In my very first attempt, I failed. I protested. No one ever told me that the pass percent is 5%, and 3 years was for those who completed in the first attempt. Second attempt, third attempt, fail. Finally, fourth attempt, again fail. 3 years of articleship over. All my friends who had started with me had crossed the finish line. They started working, started earning salaries, and here I was at the start point. How would you feel? So I went to my dad and said, "Dad, you know what? This CA thing is not my cup of tea." And he said, "So?" "Now, how do you argue with so?" I said, "So I'm quitting." And he said, "And?" I said, "And I will join you in your business." He said, "You first pass, then we will see." I said, "Dad, my friends are telling me Mathew will appear and appear till the CA Institute disappear. I've given 4 attempts. I can't do this anymore." He said, "Give one more." How cruel can someone get? Well, not just that, after giving me the lecture, he threw me out of the house. Well, technically speaking, he got me admission in a hostel. Now, hostel life was strange. I had more bread, more bhaji, and more bedbugs. No friends, new place. And those days, there was no internet. So no Facebook, no Insta, no WhatsApp, nothing. With only books for company. Those 2 years that I was in the hostel, I completed my CA. Not just CA, but in those 2 years, I was also able to complete ICWA, which is called cost accounting. When my friends got to know that I completed my CA, they said, "Hey, Mathew, CA Institute should give you a degree and PhD. Passed with high difficulty." After completing my CA, I joined Deloitte in Bombay. At the same time, I also happened to get an offer from Ernst & Young in Saudi Arabia. But there was a problem. The offer that I got from Saudi Arabia was at one level below the existing level that I had in Deloitte. So I checked with them, "I'm already at this level. Why do you offer me something at a level below that?" And they said, "Indian CAs are appointed at this level. US CPAs are appointed at a level higher than that." And I didn't know what US CPAs was. So I asked them, "What is CPA?" And they said, "Certified Public Accountant." And I thought to myself, maybe one day I will try for that. Well, I didn't take the Ernst & Young offer. I continued in Deloitte. Then Deloitte sent me on secondment to Deloitte in Qatar. And that's how my international stint started. Then I moved from public accounting, moved to finance. Went to US, got my CPA. Then I moved from finance to internal audit. It was then that I studied for CIA, which is called Certified Internal Auditor. I also did a specialty qualification, which is called CCSA, certificate in controlled self-assessment. Then my company moved me from internal audit to risk management. But I must tell you that internal audit was fun because that gave me an opportunity to go to 30 plus countries, all at company's expense. So when I got moved to risk management department, I pursued another certification, which was called ARM, Associate in Risk Management. And finally, after 15 years in the Gulf, I moved back to India. I got into an MNC, like Kerwin sir mentioned, and was heading the internal audit. Finally, 5 years ago, I left corporate and got into academics. And more recently, I gave my CFA exams with my students. When my students and I reached the exam center, and as we were headed to the exam hall, I heard a voice from behind, "Hey!" It was a security. Seeing me look at him, he said, "Parents not allowed." I had to show him my admit card. He looked at the admit card, looked at me, looked at the admit card, looked at me, and gave me the most impressive look. So that was fine. But the bigger hurdle, results. Can you imagine? You and your student writing an exam, and your student passes and you. Well, I faced an imminent embarrassment. Results day, it proved beyond doubt that I should never, ever have doubted the power of prayer. Well, I passed. So now I have CA, ICWA, CPA, CIA, CCSA, ARM, and CFA level 1. I'm not saying this to impress you, but just to impress on you that someone who got just 59% in his 10th, someone who was rejected, someone who failed time and time again, if he can go and complete these courses, then everybody can. But one thing I will never forget is when my dad put me to the hostel and asked me, drop me at the hostel, he said one thing which I will never forget. He said, "Son, if you play now, you will pay later. If you pay now, you will play later. The choice is yours." And for me, that was the first leadership lesson that I got. In other words, he was trying to tell me that if you do not lead yourself, you cannot lead anyone else. Henley has put it beautifully when he said, "You are the master of your fate. You are the captain of your soul." In other words, he's saying, our life, our leadership starts within us. If we're not able to lead ourselves, we wouldn't be able to do justice in leading others. Now, there's a guy called Earl Nightingale. He's a personal development guru. He's the one who started this entire personal development industry, and I read a lot about him. He said something beautifully. He gave us a template on how you and I can lead ourselves. He went on to say this. He said it is estimated that 95% of the people are like ships without rudders. Subject to every shift in the wind or tide, they are helplessly adrift. And all these 95% people hope that one day they will reach a rich and successful port. But well, you and I know that for every narrow harbor entrance, there's 1,000 miles of rocky coastline. And if at all one reaches the port, the chances are 1 in 1,000, if at all there is such a chance. But then he goes on to talk about the remaining 5%. He says, these are the people who have taken the time and exercised the discipline to decide on a destination and to chart a course. And he said, these are the people who sail straight and far across the deep oceans of life, reaching one port after another and accomplishing far more in a shorter duration of time than the others can accomplish in a lifetime. In other words, what Earl Nightingale is telling you and me is that if we take the time to exercise the discipline to decide on a destination, then we can achieve far more than many others who haven't. So the two things that I do, or the two questions that I ask myself in order to determine whether I'm leading myself well, are these. 1, where am I? And 2, where do I want to be? My first leadership lesson came from my dad, who said, if you play now, you pay later. If you pay now, you play later. The choice is yours. In other words, you cannot lead others unless you first lead yourself. But while you lead yourself and you remain inspired, it's only then you can inspire your team to do well. Now, let me take you back to 1985. In 1985, there was a tornado that swept through a place called Barrie in Ontario, Canada. Now, many people passed through the highway. They stopped, they parked their cars, got off, and surveyed the place. And as far as they could see, it was just smashed houses, cars turned upside down. There was loss of property, loss of lives. And just like everyone else, there was one gentleman by the name of Bob Templeton. Now, he too did the same, what the others did, got off the car, surveyed the place, but he had a thought. He said, what about doing something for the people of Ontario? So he goes to his company. He was a vice president of a company called Telemedia Communications. It was a company that had radio stations in and around Ontario. So he reaches his office. He calls all his executives to his room. He has a flip chart that is behind him. On the top of the flip chart, he writes 333. And he looks at the executives and says, would you like to make $3 million in a 3-hour window within 3 days and give it to the people of Ontario? Now, he was met with strange stares from his executives. And finally, someone gathered the courage and said, but how? Now, Bob Templeton was a very effective and a wise leader. He said, look, hold on. I never asked you whether we could or whether we should. All I asked you was, would you like to? You see, Bob was appealing to the charitable side of their nature. And unanimously, everyone said, yes, we would love to. He goes back to the flip chart. He writes a T below the letters 333. On one side of the T, he writes, why we can't. And on the other side, he writes, how we can. And on the side that had why we can't, he put a huge X there. And then he looks at his executives and says, look, I've put an X. Therefore, we can't entertain any ideas that would seem to suggest why we can't make $3 million in 3 hours within 3 days. So if any one of you gives me an idea that seems to suggest we cannot do it, then the others have to yell on the top of their voice, next. So that all the negative ideas are nexted and nexted unless we go to the positive idea. So the first idea came, we can have a radiothon across Canada. Immediately someone objected and said, but we have radio stations only in and around Ontario. Now that was a valid objection. But someone in the far corner said, or rather muttered, next. So Bob went and wrote that idea on that flip chart. Then someone else suggested, we can have Lloyd and Harvey to host the show for us. Immediately there was an objection. Someone said, no, Lloyd and Harvey are of a national stature. They are of the television industry. They will never come and do radio. Someone yelled, next. And they kept nexting all the negative ideas until they were able to have a lot of ideas. And within 3 days, under Bob Templeton's leadership, they were able to collect $3 million by organizing a 3-hour radio show where more than 50 radio stations across Canada came together and they collected $3 million for the people of Ontario. So leadership is all about inspiring people around us. It was Andrew Carnegie, one of the richest men who ever walked on planet Earth, a poor Scottish farmer who went to United States, and he once said, every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it a seed of equal or greater opportunity. So can you imagine what happens when you and I as leaders can inspire the team around us? There once was a warrior by the name of Cortez. Now Cortez had to fight an enemy whose soldiers far outnumbered his own. So he put them in a boat, went to the enemy, sailed to the enemy territory. And what did he do? He unloaded the equipment, he unloaded the soldiers, and he told his soldiers, burn the boats. Can you imagine how inspired the soldiers would be? After burning the boats and before the first battle, he addressed them and said, look, the boats have gone up in smoke. Now you either win or you perish. Well, Cortez and his soldiers were able to win that battle. Well, if you just go back a year, when the pandemic struck us, and when institutions and organizations were reeling under the pressure of not knowing what to do, our university was one of the first to be proactive, to take steps, to change the teaching, learning methods, to address the concerns of our students, to have online classes. Even when they were faced with opposition from unwanted element, they went ahead and had examinations. How inspiring is that leadership? The resilience that was shown in these trying times is what helps a leader to stand out. And we were all inspired by what we saw. We had to change our ways, adjust our ways, but we all did it. And that's a wonderful example of how we inspire the people around us. So one, leadership is all about leading ourselves, asking the question, who am I? Where am I headed to? Second, it's all about inspiring the people around us and wanting them to be more, do more, have more, and give more. But leadership, in addition to do these two things, is also about watching out. Talking of watches, I remember the time I got my first watch. I was in the 6th standard, and my first watch was a Fawaluba, a Swiss-made one. My aunt, who used to work in Muscat, Oman, she had come down on vacation and she had gifted me that watch. Golden dial, black strap. And for the first few days I wore it to school, I walked with my left arm out. Well, obviously I had to show off. But let's go back to 1968. In 1968, Switzerland, they were dominating the world of watchmaking. But they never rested on their laurels. They were continuous inventors. They were continuously raising the bar. They were leading the research when it came to discovering new ways of creating gears, bearings, mainsprings. They were on the cutting edge of research when it came to waterproofing technology. They were the pioneers when it came to self-winding watches. In other words, the Swiss were innovators, constant innovators. No wonder that they held 65% of the world's watch market. Now fast forward 12 years. In 1980, the Swiss watchmaking or watchmakers, their market share went from 65% to 10%. Now what happened? They met with a paradigm shift. The old mechanical mechanism gave way to electronics. And everything that was relevant in the old scheme of things, the gears, the bearings, the mainsprings, was irrelevant in the new scheme of things. So the Swiss watchmaking industry, which was so dominant, so profitable, so secure, they lost in just 12 years. 50,000 of the 62,000 watchmakers lost their job, which means to say that out of every 10 watchmakers, 8 of them were left or rendered unemployed, lost their livelihoods. Now, for a country as small as Switzerland, that was catastrophic. Then the question is, who gained at Swiss's expense? Well, it was the Japanese who gained. In 1968, the Japanese had just 1% of the market share, but they were on the on creating a new world-class electronic technology. And the electronic quartz watch was a natural derivative of that. It was this company called Seiko that led the charge. And by mid-1990s, they had 33% of the market share. Swiss were dethroned. But then there is an irony to this story. The Swiss lost their position to Japan. But do you know that this world-class electronic technology was invented by the Swiss themselves in their own research institute in Neuchâtel, Switzerland? When their researchers were so excited about this new discovery and presented it to the watchmakers took one look at it and said, "Oh, this has no gears. This has no bearings. This has no mainsprings. This is battery operated. This can never, ever be a watch of the future." And they dismissed it as useless. But the one mistake that they did was they allowed the researchers to showcase this invention in the World Watch Congress in 1968. Seiko took one look at it, and the rest is history. See, many a times we look at the future and we think this future is a place of uncertainty, insecurity, a place that is going to give us, that is going to rob us of all our peace of mind, a place of fear. But if you come to think of it, the future is where our greatest leverage is. In the past, maybe we can learn from it. The present, the window of time is so slim that we can do nothing but only react. But the future, that's where our living or where our life is going to be. So in his book, Paradigms, How to Discover the Future, Joel Barker writes something. He says, what happened to Switzerland was their own making, their inability to predict or anticipate their future. And he goes on to explain three things. He says, for any organization or institution to survive, he says there are three important things. And one is excellence. He says, excellence is the price that you have to pay for entry, because without giving excellent services, nobody will even ask you. The second thing he talks about is innovation. He says that's the price you pay in order to be competitive. But the most important thing, and the thing that he ranks on the top, is anticipation, our ability to see the future. And he says, if you and I can develop a way of looking at the future and anticipating it and preparing for it, then we need not fear it. Rather, we can embrace it, we can welcome it, we can prepare for its coming. Dr. Christopher Hegarty, a top-notch management consultant who's an expert in transformational change, he said something on these lines. He says, the past, you can't even refer it because that's outdated. He says most of your present is obsolete, and the future for most people is beyond comprehension. But it's not all gloom and doom, Christopher Hegarty says. He says this is the best time for you and I to be alive. Because if we have the right information, if we have the tools, if we have the wherewithal to be able to see where we are headed, then we can stay prepared. And once we are able to do that, then as leaders, we can help our organization, our institution to be at the right place at the right time with the right product, with excellent and innovative products. So leadership is about looking into the future, anticipating, and helping our institution be at the right place at the right time with the right service. So for me to wind up all that I said today, leadership, it starts within. We can't lead others unless we lead ourselves. I learned that from my dad when he told me, if you play now, you pay later. If you pay now, you play later. So first lead yourself. And as leaders, when you and I are inspired, only then can we inspire the people around us to be more, do more, have more, and give more. And finally, leadership is also about seeing beyond what really meets the eye. And when we are able to see beyond what meets the eye, that's when we will help our teams to be at the right place at the right time with an excellent product. So as leaders, my wish for all of you as Christ leaders is that you may be that beacon of light, that lighthouse that will serve the student community and everybody around you. And I hope that Christ University will go ahead and transform generations and generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Mathew. In fact, that was a beautiful narration of your experience and journey. I'm sure there are a lot of questions that the audience have got to ask you. Before we take it forward, let me just inform all the participants. You can definitely ask Professor Mathew any question. You can unmute yourself and speak, or you can also, in case if you are multitasking at the same time, you can drop into the chat box where I can take it forward. But before the first question comes in, I have got a question to you, Professor Mathew. So you said you faced a lot of failures from starting from that 59 number, going to a lot of other challenges that you had. What is that one thing that kept you inspiring at that age? Over to you.
Okay. So I think I wasn't inspired at that stage. In fact, I was looking of ways to escape, and I was trying to escape from that, what was thrust upon me. Well, being a very mediocre and an average student, not being able to speak, I had a lot of complex. And when I failed a couple of times, I thought, this is not my cup of tea. Everyone around you is passing, they're reaching positions, and you are here, you are stuck. And if my dad had not asked me to give that one more attempt, I think I wouldn't have done it. But if I look back at hindsight, I would think that I felt very low about myself. I had no confidence, and I thought I was not able to do it because everywhere I went, I met with failure. And I wanted to give in and throw in the towel at the earliest opportunity. But if you ask me that question now, even though I meet with failure even now, I think I've failed much more than I have succeeded now, but I still believe three things are important, not just one. The first thing I see is attitude. I think attitude is everything. If you have a good attitude, it doesn't matter if you fail. You look at failure as only another step to success. Failing is fine, but quitting is not fine. So the first thing is attitude. The second thing I believe is belief. How do you look at yourself in the mirror and say, I can do it, even when you're met with failures, even when you are down in the dumps? If you can look up and say, I believe, because as the great teacher one taught us, everything is possible for one who believes. So somehow, if that belief comes into us, or if we are able to believe in our venture, believe in whatever we are after, I think that is also going to keep us going. And the third thing, I think, is confidence. Now, too much confidence, you may think, I don't need to learn. Too little confidence, you may think, I cannot learn. That amount of confidence, because confidence is required for us to take that next step and say, you know what, it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to quit. And you keep going and going and going. And I've experienced so many failures, so I keep telling myself and my students, don't worry if you don't clear the first time. You will be fourth time lucky. So keep trying, and you never know. But don't do the same thing over and over again, because doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is insanity. So try something new every time. And once you're focused, I think, sooner or later, you would get what you're after.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there's some questions that's coming up. If somebody wants to unmute yourself and ask directly, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we've got.
So may I ask?
Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Professor, for this wonderful enlightening speech. My name is Ruben. I'm from School of Law. Can you please tell us your challenges which you faced as a teacher? Because you worked with the corporate and you moved into the academics. So what were the challenges you faced as a teacher?
Sir, I think, Ruben, sir, corporate has its own challenges, and teaching, handling students has its own challenges. Initially, I thought it was an easy game, but I came to realize that being a teacher is much more difficult than what I thought it would be. I think it's more difficult than being in corporate. Sometimes I feel it's like herding cats. Herding sheep is fine, but herding cats. So sometimes I think I need to go down to their level to understand them. So coming from an industry perspective, I tend to have, I think, a little more tolerance that what I used to have when I joined as a newbie professor. At that time, I thought it's better that we have that kind of a distance and things like that. But the challenge is, I think one thing is, how do you keep them engaged all the time? The second thing is, how can we motivate them and want them to be more, do more, and have more? These are all challenges. I think I'm still a newbie in this, sir. I know you're all experts and know how to meet these challenges, but I did face this challenge coming from corporate is, how do you keep them engaged? You see, if you come in from a corporate, the first lecture will be interesting, but the second lecture, you'll be telling them the same thing, what you told them in the first lecture. In the third lecture, you'll be telling them the same thing. And finally, they'll look at you and say, sir, you're repeating yourself. So I at least had to reinvent myself to be able to get into this mold of teaching. Of course, it does help when you bring in a little of corporate experiences, but the challenge is, how do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them motivated? And how do you upgrade yourself? Because you can't be the same teacher going to a class semester after semester. Unless you upgrade yourself, unless you bring in yourself in a new way, then I think, so I think it's not the entire thing done. So if I may articulate it in one line, I just try to be a different teacher every time I come to a different semester. I mean, still work in progress, but I'm trying.
Thank you so much. Because I'm also from a teaching background. My mother was a teacher in the same school which I studied. And after every class, an FIR was filed at the teacher's staff room about me. So you and I share the same boat. Thank you.
Yes, sir. What happens in class goes home, and then finally back at home, my mom used to play Tom and I used to be Jerry. And finally after the chase, she would get me, and then so it was buy one, get one free. Buy one in class, get couple at home free of cost.
True. Thank you so much. We have got another question coming up from Mr. Parthiban. Mr. Parthiban, can you unmute and speak, or do you want to?
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you go ahead.
Yes, sir. Hello, Matthew, sir.
Hi, Parthiban, sir.
Yes, sir. So my question to you is, could you please throw some light on spirituality in leadership? How important is spirituality? Do you have any experience of you connecting spirituality to your leadership? Right. Could you please share a few words on that?
Sure, sir. Sir, this is more like a case study than a MCQ or a 5-mark essay question, but let me try. I'll give you my thoughts on what I think of who I and you are. Well, I've come to believe that we are all spiritual beings, and we exist on 3 levels of existence. So I believe that we are spiritual beings, we have an intellect, and we live in this physical body. So having said that, all of us then are spiritual. So we have that kind of a connect. At least this is my belief. We have that kind of a connect where our spirit is always for expansion and fuller expression. Our spirit deep within wants to do more, have more, and give more. So even as leaders, a great leader, they say, is not creating followers, but a great leader is creating more leaders. And the only reason he or she is able to do that is because they want to give more of themselves to the others so that others can grow. So I believe, my personal opinion is that we are all spiritual beings. Spirit is always for expansion and fuller expression, to want to do more, to be better than what we were yesterday. And therefore, even as leaders, we want not just to look at ourselves and our leadership and our followers, but we want to create more and more and more of leaders so that together as a team, we build more leaders rather than more followers. I hope I've answered that question, Parthiban, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sir, this is Professor Pradeep speaking. May I ask a small question?
Sure, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I'm Pradeep, working in Kingiri campus, for computer science and engineering. I have a small anecdote. I just wanted to put it forward, and I take advice from the resource person. Sir, I'm heading the strategic plan in my department. And, all the criteria heads are quite elder than me. Every time I face this challenge, I go to their personal desk. I send so many mails to them because they're quite occupied and they're most of them are professors. I find it slightly difficult, but somehow I will, with my friendly attitude, I go ask them, give me the documents, and they give the documents end of the day. But every time my HOD, when we are trying to consolidate everything, he'll ask me, Pradeep, how did you get the documents? Then I will say, sir, I went there, I went here, I was behind them. No, he will say, no, that's not the case. You should able to, put them in a room and then discuss with them, have some brainstorming sessions, meetings, all that, and get the documents. Then I tell him, sir, that is quite, not so practical, because I'm dealing with senior professors. Sometimes there is this, the age matters or something like that. So what is your suggestion for young leaders to communicate, collaborate with senior people? Especially in the education system, like, university stuff where documentation plays a key role. That is my question, sir. Thank you.
Sir, I think this will be my last address to Christ University if I answer your question. But, I think when we come as a team, it's not about who is elder or who is younger. My personal belief is when somebody is assigned a task, age doesn't matter there. So the first thing you need to get out of your mind is I'm younger to them and they are senior. They're more qualified than me or whatever. I mean, so you have to go with the mindset of everybody is at the same level playing field. You are assigned a task and you're getting that task done. I've been an internal auditor, and I can tell you, sir, from my experience, that internal auditors are one species in the entire universe who are, I would have loved to say loved the most, but they aren't. They are hated the most. When you know that an internal auditor is coming, things start to move. So I've been in that place for a long time of my life. So we are not, when we ask something and when we request information, we always, most of the time, we have to bear the brunt. But I think in an institution like this, when everybody understands that their giving an information is going to help in the entire organization, their entire department, when you impress upon them, and everybody has their own challenges, everybody is doing their things. I know at Christ University, a lot of our staff and colleagues are, have a lot of work, and they're working tirelessly for the upliftment of their departments and their schools. So sometimes it does happen that priorities do change. Yes, you have got to follow up, but it's fine, sir. I think we've got to live with it and ask that question and create maybe some kind of a template. Like your HOD said, maybe having them in a room could help. Maybe giving them a deadline and saying, look, because if you do not give me, my deadline is getting shifted and then I've got to bear the brunt. Something of that sort. You'd have to come up with some techniques. But one thing you need to remember, sir, is we're all at the same level. There is no senior and junior here, at least when a task is assigned to you. And when you are the master of that task, you've got to get it done. So you come up with more innovative ways of doing it. I think all of us have that kind of a creativity. So if one thing doesn't work, maybe you need to try it the other way around. If nothing works, sir, lock them up in a room like your HOD said and tell them to write it, finish it, and don't let them go home unless it is done.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. Before we take the next question, I would request all the participants to just check your chat box. The leadership chair has posted a form for us to fill up on this particular session, the feedback form. Would request all of you to please complete that. Thank you. And yes, we'll go to the next question.
Kerwin, sir, can I come? This is Biju Toms.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So in our campus, in our department, we find so many qualified people with a lot of experience and exposure coming to engage the students. But I rarely see someone like you having the same level of passion, same kind of enthusiasm, 365 days. So probably to all of us, faculty members, can you share the secret of your high level of energy when you go and engage the students?
Okay, sir. I'll try to do what I'll try to answer that question. It's quite a difficult question to answer. Well, it's for the students to say whether I maintain that kind of an energy. But what I'd like to do every time I go for a class is to be prepared, because many a times, and all of us teachers, I'm sure we are prepared, but I sometimes tend to think that if my preparation is lacking, then when I go to a class, I'm not able to give that kind of a focus or that kind of an energy. Because when I know that I've prepared, I've done my homework, the first thing is I go prepared. Like if it's for a talk, and if you know that you're going to give a talk for this amount of time, but you go prepared for it, then that energy automatically comes because you're willing to face what's thrown at you. But if you're yourself not prepared, then I think that's the first reason I would feel a little unprepared. The second thing is, for everything, if you do your best, things will come around to you. So you don't have to do much about it. You just have to take that particular task that is assigned to you and do it in the best possible way. Now, some days, there are days where it will not work. Some days it will work for us. We have our own personal challenges going around us. So some days we may be at the receiving end, but so long as we know that our purpose, and so long as we know that we need to do it and give it our best, I think that's the only formula. There's no secret sauce to that, but just try to do the things that you have to do in the best possible way. Every little step you do, say if it is done in the best possible way, how could it be done? I think that's the only thing, sir. I hope I am able to deliver in ways of showing enthusiasm and energy. But there are days where we all feel low, but other days we keep trying. We keep trying to be better versions of ourselves. We try to be innovative, try to do things in a little different way. And when we keep doing things, wanting to do things in a better way, I think that takes care of itself.
Thank you so much. I hope Professor Mathew answered your question, Professor Biju Toms.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's a very important cue that you said in the last two responses. One was about preparedness and the energy that you should have, because when you start preparing, you generally have the energy to work. That's definitely true in most of the studies. In fact, today also there are a lot of studies that they do on energy at work and how it leads to performances and attachment and so on. So we will hear out the next question if somebody has got any question to ask Professor Mathew.
Kerwin, sir, I have a question too.
Please go ahead, sir.
Energetic and a well thought out talk. The real question I want to ask you is how do you get along with Biju Toms? But the unreal question I want to ask is, the reference to the Swiss watch industry, which saw which of course invented and saw the digital clock and said it won't work. As an administrator or as an academic leader, one would find 1,000 ideas thrown off to you almost every day, right? And how would one ever know, right, that this is the idea that needs to be picked, right? And somebody else, of course, who might come and see, might say, find it meaningful. So how do leaders get around this? And this is true of course, I've seen this with the previous vice chancellor. I've seen this with the present vice chancellor. I've seen this myself, where hundreds of faculty students come saying, look, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do the idea? And then there's a media tells you, UGC tells you, look, try this idea, try this. So there are hundreds from all sides of ideas. And I'm presuming the same thing also happens for HODs and deans. We may be, as registrar, giving ideas, control of exam saying, do this. And then, the wonderful newspaper articles and prime minister saying you do this, so everybody says you do this. So there are many ideas. How do you know that one thing that's going to be detrimental for your sustenance and growth? Thank you.
Yeah. Sir, I'll answer the unreal question first and then I'll go to the real question. You did talk about Professor Biju Toms. Well,
definitely you have to tell that. Definitely you have to tell that.
Sure. There is one of the professional bodies that we are associated with. It's called ACCA, and their tagline is "Think Ahead." Well, when you work with somebody of the stature of Biju Toms, sir, he is like not think ahead. He thinks miles and miles ahead. So that's a privilege, I would think, and that's really an honor to be able to work with somebody of that stature. So, having answered the the first question, let me try to answer the second question. So I read once about what Peter Drucker said, and he said whenever you have to anticipate or whenever you have to do something that's different, he gives us 3 or 4 ways to do it. One of them, he says, is convergent thinking. What he means by convergent thinking is where you can gather all the information and then decide on what is more important. Now, again, that's up to the administrators. That's, again, their intuition, their gut feel at that point in time in taking a decision. You may never be the right. That decision may never be the right decision in hindsight, but at that time, with the information that was available to us, with the scenario that we could foresee, we've taken a decision and so be it. So he calls that convergent thinking. The second thing he says is divergent thinking, wherein you look at one problem and then you find different ways of solving it. And that's, looking at different solution to come up with one problem. That's divergent thinking. He also talks about mapping, how you want to get from one place to the other. He talks about imaging, but all of this is all theoretical. Like you said, sir, when it comes to ground reality, we are bombarded by ideas by all sides. But I think what could work best is looking at divergent thinking there, or convergent thinking, I should say. Look at all the things with the information that we have at a point in time. We make our decisions. Tomorrow going forward, we may realize that that was the wrong decision. But also, had we taken another decision, that could also be wrong. So I think there's no one size fits all. It's always failing, learning. And at the end of the day, 10 years down the line, when we look back and taken a decision, and if we say, if I have to take that same decision today, maybe I'll be different. But that time I took the decision very objectively, taking consent of our people or the intellectuals around us. That may be the right decision. And that's what we thought. So be it.
Hello, Mo?
Yes, sir. Can you hear him? Because I'm not able to hear him.
I'm not audible, ma'am?
No. Just a moment, Prof Mathew. I think she's talking to somebody else. I think so.
Mr. Sivaratna Mohan, could you? Yeah.
So that's also part of the session. They are all multitasking as well.
Oh, yes.
So fine. Thank you so much for that, answering that. I hope Professor Mathew did answer Dr. Anil.
Yes,
Dr.
thanks.
Anil? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So let's have one more question if somebody wants. Otherwise, we are nearing to the close of the session. One more question. Otherwise, I will ask a question.
No case study question, sir.
No, not at all. But yes, I think this. So I will ask. I wanted to ask you this in space of you had a very short mention about Mindspace. You've been a trainer there, and you also inspire people, and actually what you did today. So can you relate to Mindspace and leadership?
Sure, sir. I think leadership, after all, is a mindset, right? And when I talk of mind space, it's all about our attitudes, belief, confidence, all those kinds of things. So what I've come to learn in 2012, I started reading a little more about this because that caught my interest. And I believe that we are who we think about. And I'm not saying this from my experience, but there is a video by Earl Nightingale, and he puts it beautifully. He says, eventually we become what we think about. So our thoughts is what directs our feelings. Our feelings is what directs our actions. Our action which causes us to get results. So if we want to change the results, we might as well go and change our thoughts. So this is the entire mind space that I've come to believe in. Same applies with any kind of leadership role that we play. If you're not able to think as a leader, if you're not able to think beyond what we can see, or if you're not able to inspire the people around us, then there has to be some change that you and I need to inculcate in our lives. So mind space is nothing about understanding who we really are, understanding that we are really beings who want to express and expand ourselves, to be better versions of ourselves. And at the end of the day, we are meant to be somebody. Can we be that somebody? We have a very limited time on planet Earth. So if we can make the best of what is given to us, doing what we have at the place that we stand, doing the best that we can, and leaving everything else to destiny. Like Henley once said, we are the master of our fate. We are the captain of our souls. So all I can say is we set sail on this beautiful voyage on exploring new things, different things, and finally we'll reach that we'll reach that shore that we are all headed to. Where am I? Where am I headed to go? Or where am I headed to? Like Mark Twain once said, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the things you did do. So throw off the bowline, sail away from safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. So the mind space is all about exploring, dreaming, discovering, making mistakes, but learning from your mistakes. And every mistake that you make is another small stepping stone for you. So we never fail, but we fail forward.
Brilliant, and thank you so much for that thought. before we close the session and before I thank everybody, I would like to have our leader, Father Abraham, if you have any comments or if you want to share some thoughts with the speaker.
So thank you, Kerwin. It was a very inspiring, wonderful talk. I was waiting for it. One day, Bijitums came to me and we had a long conversation. During that, we had in my mind, we are going to start a leadership hub for the Asian University leaders in Kengeri campus. Then I used to ask him, we need inspiring teachers, inspiring speakers. Can you find somebody? Yes, Mathew Varghese is there. He's very, very inspiring, powerful talk. Yes, giving powerful talk and so on. Immediately I ordered. I think I told Tony, I want to give Mathew Varghese a chance in the leadership hub. I think 6 months back I told. Now only you are getting the chance.
Thank you,
So
Father.
I am fully satisfied by your passion and your life experience. I was going through your biodata, CA, ICWA, CPA. My God, I can't imagine all these things. Okay, only a very brilliant can achieve all these degrees. It is impossible. CA itself is very difficult. But you are inspiring our students now. You are teaching the brightest minds of Christ University in the professional studies, and you are managing them. And so I am very proud of you because a very good-looking, charming, even from the photos come, you will be attracted and they will be impressed. That I'm sometimes I will lose talk. Don't worry. So thank you so much for the wonderful.
Thank you, Father.
And the leadership is coming from within. That is very impressive for me because I am a human being. I have anger, depression, all frustration, everything because you have to control everything. When I appear before you, I should be smiling, I should be sober, I should be mature. But it needs some kind of self-discipline because human beings, all kinds of, because the outside is whenever we do something good, don't think that we are appreciated. Okay, jealousy is more than appreciation. That's a feeling I am getting. So our life is tough. Then all these natural tendencies, the leadership start from within. That's a great lesson. We have to control ourselves. We should be intelligent. We should be spiritual. We should be forgiving. All these things coming from within. So thank you for the inspiring. Keep it up, and we want to listen more from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Father. I think we have come to an end of the session. And before we close, I would personally want to thank Professor Mathew Varghese on behalf of everybody here. In fact, there are a lot of comments that's coming up, and I think everybody focuses on that particular word, excellent. It was an excellent session and very inspiring session. So also your narration of your entire journey from 59 to getting 95 is what I would say, definitely, that a simple boy or a simple man becoming into a superhuman or a superman is the story that we heard. And definitely, as what you said, leadership starts from within. Leadership is always managing yourself first and then looking around and beyond. So with that, thank you so much for your presence and inspiring all of us here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Father.